Alright, number 10, we're going to solve the triangle. And so if we solve a triangle, we find all the missing pieces. So I need to know what this angle here is for C. I need to know the missing side V and the missing side C. So the easiest one to start with is finding the measure of angle C. And since it's a triangle, they all have to add up to 180. So if you do 180 minus 83, that should give you 97. And then minus the 36, and that should give you 61. So we know that the measure of angle C is 61 degrees. So now we're going to use our law of sines to figure out the other missing sides. And the law of sines says the sine of A over the side opposite that angle A is going to be equal to the sine of B over the side opposite B, which is equal to the sine of C over the side opposite angle C. So we really only need to worry about two of these, so let's go with what we know. The sine of 83 over the side opposite is 29. And let's go ahead and solve C first, which is going to be, so now we use the angle opposite, so 61 is going to be over C. And now we just cross multiply, and so I get C times the sine of 83 is going to equal the sine of, or 29 times the sine of 61. And now to get rid of this, remember this is just a number, divide both sides by the sine of 83. And so C is going to equal 29 times the sine of 61 over the sine of 83, which is going to equal, so if you type that into your calculator, you get 25.55, which is going to round to 25.6 because we're rounding to the nearest tenth. If you're using one of the inspires, you want to make sure that this looks like your work does. So 25.6. And now we're going to find the side V. So we're going to use the law of sines again. Again, we want to use the 83 degrees and the 29 because we haven't rounded anything. So the sine of 83 degrees over 29 is going to equal, now we're using 36 because it's opposite the V, the sine of 36 degrees over V, cross multiply, and so we get V times the sine of 83 is equal to 29 times the sine of 36 divided by the sine of 83. And so V is going to equal this into my calculator. And let's see what that does. Alright, so when we plug that in, we get 17.17. So that's going to round to 17.2. So that gives us 17.2. And so just take a quick second to make sure that you're following the triangle inequality theorem. The biggest side here is 29. It's opposite the biggest angle. The smallest side is 17.2, which is opposite the smallest angle. And so the medium side is opposite the medium angle. So now I have all 6 pieces of the triangle. I have my 3 angles and my 3 sides, so the triangle has been solved. Alright, for 11, again we're going to solve the triangle, so we got to find the missing pieces. So we need to find angle V, we need to find angle C, and side E. So we're missing 3 things. So this is an example where now we can't use the law of sines yet. So we're going to actually use the law of cosines. And so it's going to be a squared is going to equal b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. And so like when we were finding the area, this A, the angle that we use, has to be in the included angle. And so that would make these the B and C, with this here being the angle A that we're using. Alright, so this is going to be 31 squared plus 64 squared minus 2 times 31 times 64 times the cosine of 37. So let's go ahead and plug that into the calculator. So when you type it into the calculator, one of the great things about the Inspire is that when you type it in, it'll look just like your work does. So now we hit enter, and we get this crazy looking number. Because again, right now we're looking for a side, and we have 31, 64, 1,888 doesn't make sense. And so you have to remember that this was a squared. So now we need to square root this. So to square root it, all you got to do is hit Control X squared, and that gives you the square root symbol. And if you want to get that answer over here, instead of retyping it, you can just hit Control the negative sign, because you see the ANS, that stands for the last answer. And so that's going to give you 43.45, which makes more sense now. And we're rounding to the nearest tenth, so 43.5. That means E here is going to be 43.5. And now that makes sense in the triangle. So now we got to find one of the angles. And to do that, we're going to use the law of sines. So let's do the sine of 37. The side opposite the 37 is the 43.5. Now let's go ahead and just do sine C. The side opposite C is 31. And so now we're going to multiply, cross multiply. And so we get 31 sine of 37 is equal to 43.5 the sine of C, divided by 43.5. And so we get the sine of C is equal to, let's just go ahead and plug this into the calculator, 31 sine of 37 divided by 43.5. So when you plug that into your calculator, you get 0.42888, which doesn't really make sense in the problem we're doing. And that's because what we found whatever this angle is, when I take the sine of that angle, it equals 0.4288. So I need to do the inverse of my sine. So go to your trig functions. And now, since we're looking for sine, we're going to do the inverse sine. Again, use that last answer button. And so that gives us 25.3965, which now makes sense. So let's do 25.4 degrees. So C is equal to 25.4 degrees. The sine of C was at 0.4288. Alright, so now I know this here is 25.4 degrees. To find V, I'm just going to do 180 minus 37 minus 25.4, which gives me 117.6 degrees. So now I know my three angles, now I know my three sides, so we have solved this triangle. Alright, so now we're going to, again, solve the triangle. This time they give me all three sides. So again, I can't use the law of sines because I would need to know at least one of the angles. So I'm going to start with the law of cosines again. So the a squared is going to equal b squared plus c squared minus 2bc cosine of a. So let's go ahead and let this be angle A. So that makes this B, this C, and this A. For this problem, I actually like to label it to help me. So we're going to just plug in the 7 squared plus 15 squared. Now here we know what A is, so we have to plug that in on the left side. 12 squared minus 2B, I know what B is, 2 times 7 times 15 and the cosine of A. So let's work that out. Okay, so we're going to have 144, and then this is going to be 49 plus 225 minus 2 times 7 is 14 times 15 is 210, and the cosine of A so 49 plus 225 gives us 274. Now it's 144 equals 274 minus 210 times cosine of A. And since this is being times by the cosine of A, I can't combine them. So I'm going to minus the 274 to both sides. And so it gives us negative 130 is equal to negative 210 times the cosine of A. Now if I want to get rid of that, I can divide both sides by negative 210. It's going to cancel. It's going to become positive, so I get 13 over 21 is equal to the cosine of A. And so like on the last problem, now we're going to do the inverse of the cosine of A. So let's see what that looks like on the calculator. So what we want to do is we want to go to our trig menu, and we want to do the inverse with the negative 1, the cosine. What happened? Alright, so we want to type in 13 divided by 21. And so that means that the angle measure for A is 51.8. So A is going to equal 51.8. So this is 51.8 degrees. So now that I know an angle and the side opposite the angle, now I can use the law of sines. So the sine of 51.8 degrees over the side opposite, that's 12. That's going to equal the sine of, let's do V, and the side opposite V is 7. Now cross multiply and solve, and so we're going to get the sine of V is equal to 7 times the sine of 51.8 over 12. Let's type that into our calculator. So right now we have the sine of V is equal to 0.458. Again, that doesn't make sense, so it's kind of telling you need to do an extra step. So we're going to have to do the inverse. The inverse sine of our last answer. So we're doing the inverse sine of 0.458. And that gives us 27.3 degrees. So angle V is 27.3. And so now to find E, we can just use our calculator and do 180 minus the 27.3 minus the 51.8. And that's 100.9. So now we have our 3 angles, we have our 3 sides already, and so now the triangle has been solved.